Hi everyone, if you're new to the channel, I'm Miguel Moital, and today we've got a different video. Not only we are in a different setting, I am on campus rather than in my studio, but perhaps more importantly, we have a different presenter. And today's presenter is Ellie Strutt. She was one of my dissertation students. She did extremely well in her dissertation, and along the way she learned a great deal about doing research and writing a dissertation. So at the end, I challenged her to record a video where she could share some of the tips to help you write a better dissertation. She came up with 10 tips, which are the focus of today's video.
Do not delete anything when you're in your reading stage. So I know at one point I had a lot of information, but I thought I wouldn't need a chunk of it, and I got rid of it, and I actually did need it in the end. So even if you don't feel like it's useful, maybe have a secondary document and move that reading over to there, because you never know when you're going to have a brainwave and think, oh, actually, like I could actually add that into my dissertation. So I know this doesn't work for everybody, but for me personally, looking back, I think I would have benefited from having dates, even if they're just set by yourself, like, okay, by this day I want this done, or this day I need this done, just so you track better. Because I remember when it got to handing in my draft, all I had to show for my draft at that stage was my introduction and literature review. So I never got any feedback on my methodology or my findings and discussion or my conclusion. And although it doesn't need to be perfect what you hand in, just handing in a little bit of each section would be beneficial than having no feedback whatsoever. Because when you get to that cut-off point with your supervisor and you've had no feedback on a section, it's stressful. So again, although that doesn't work for everybody, having dates, it's something that could work for somebody out there having milestones. I think when you're in your research and your reading article stage, start that early so that you can explore things that you might think at the start might not be necessary, but because I read those papers, it then completely changed my view on my dissertation. I think it's just so important to read as much as possible, whether you think it's going to be completely relevant or not, because it could lead you somewhere else. I don't feel like any piece of reading is almost a waste of reading when you're in that early stage. Try not to be too closed-minded with your topic area. I think it's great if you know exactly from the get-go what you want to do, but I think that can pigeonhole you quite a lot. And I think it's just important to explore a lot at the beginning. When I first was trying to come up for an idea of what I wanted to do my dissertation on, I had a completely different angle of what I thought I was going to write about, and then just reading those different papers and you just start thinking of different ideas. So, for example, when I was doing my reading, I came across a theme to do with impulse buying, and my dissertation was focusing on making up for lost time. And I wasn't entirely too sure when I first read about impulse buying about how I could tie it in. So I just kind of left it to the side. And then later on, I realised how I could embed that. But that would not have been possible if I hadn't have read so extensively, dipping into different areas. And yeah. Another thing I found when writing my literature review is I kind of steered off course of my topic. And ended up focusing on, I didn't focus on the aim of my study as much, which meant I basically scrapped and restarted writing my literature review. Don't be scared of doing that, because I think it can be very daunting when you feel like you're scrapping like a section of work you've done and like dedicated time to, but ultimately you will get a better outcome by restarting, and you will more than likely fulfill the aim of your study. You need to make sure you're doing that with your literature review, and if that means restarting writing it, And also it's not as difficult, I don't think, rewriting, because you're so familiar with your literature at that point. It's not as hard to write about. So when I was doing my reading for my literature review, the kind of route or method that I would use when collating all my readings was just get open a Word document, and whilst you're reading, if you see anything that could be a theme or an interesting point, what I would do is I would put the name of the theme. For example, in my case, barriers to making up for lost time. And then when I was doing my reading, anything that I would see that would relate to that, I would then bullet point underneath it. So in my example, again, barriers for making up for lost time, there was 2 different categories. So I'd have one bullet point for one and then indent again and put information under that and do the same for the other barrier. And then you end up with this document where it's so much easier to write your literature review because most of your themes are already there waiting for you to write about. Finding a good maybe 3 or 4 methodology books and seriously taking the time to read them is one of the most helpful things I did. I feel like methodology, it kind of reminds me of like when you do maths in school. Like once it's kind of not like a set way of doing it, but it's a section of the dissertation that I found that once I read those couple of books and gained that knowledge of the methodology, it was quite easy to write about. So with your methodology, it's more prescriptive. It's, okay, you're doing it this way, X, Y, Z. So if you read those books and you get a solid foundation, it makes the writing of that section a lot easier. You just really do need to make sure you've done your reading, I think, for that section, like with those books. I think you just need to make sure like your questions of what you're trying to find out are clear, solid, because then you can go into that data analysis and it kind of keeps you from going off the wrong track and keeps you on course of what is your aim of your study, what are your objectives. So making sure they're really clear will really help your data analysis. So in my case, my 4 objectives were to understand the antecedents, attributes, consequences, and barriers of the making up for lost time concept. So then when I was doing my data analysis, all I was trying to focus on finding were the antecedents, attributes, barriers, and consequences. So it was very focused. I think with your conclusion, I know your conclusion is one of the final things you do in your dissertation. And I know from experience, I was very tired by the time I got to my conclusion, but really try and not leave it to last minute. And because if you've got a really good piece of work, you don't want the ending to kind of seem rushed or not thought through. So if you can, really do and try not leave your conclusion to last minute. So when you're doing your conclusion, it's really important that you almost zoom out from your results and take your findings to what's called like the more principle level of the concept or theory. So for example, one of the findings in my study was that individuals can delay the onset to make up for lost time if they have a fear of contracting COVID-19. Now, if we take that to the principle level, it would be more that health risks in general can have an impact on the onset to making up for lost time activities. And this means that I was able to offer a principle that hadn't been uncovered before and contribute to the knowledge of what we know of the making up for lost time concept.
If you've enjoyed the video, please press the like button, and if you're not subscribed, please subscribe to the channel. If you want to know more about Ellie's research, we recorded another video where Ellie shares the results of her research, and I'll throw the link in the description below. Talking about videos, if you want to learn more tips from my students, you can watch this video. And if you want to learn from me on how to address one of Ellie's tips, you can watch this one. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you at the next video.